Hello, my name is Curtis Merriweather Jr. You are listening to the Business Theologist Podcast. This podcast is for new and seasoned business professionals looking to uncover knowledge gems. This podcast is unlike other business podcasts because we endeavor to create a synergistic relationship between business, management, scholarship, and theology. In addition to being an executive leader, I am also a doctoral candidate. The insights shared on this podcast will give you an edge over the competition. Whether you're an entrepreneur, intrapreneur, or executive leader, or someone looking to change careers, I invite you to travel along this learning journey with me. Buckle up and let's get ready for the ride. Let's go. Well, welcome, guys. We have another exciting show for you today. I am bringing back a good friend of mine, Mr. Michael Richard Cauley. You guys remember him from a few episodes ago. Just a brief reminder, Michael Cauley, Dr. Michael Cauley, because Michael already has a doctorate already. As you guys may remember, he's in a doctoral program with me. He's in the executive doctoral program, but I'm just going to give you guys a brief reminder of who he is. Dr. Michael Cauley is a performance coaching program director. He works alongside other directors concerning recruitment, advertising, interviewing, scheduling, programming, and communicating with other faculty fellows concerning course content and students. Now, Michael is uniquely positioned because not only is he pursuing an executive doctoral program, but he also is an instructor at another school. I'm not going to call his school name because I did not ask him for his permission prior to disclosing that information. But he's self-described as a curious learner, passionate to help. Cauley brings over 15 years of experience as a turnaround and startup leader and 8 years in academia. As a practitioner-scholar or scholar practitioner, Cauley is also principal of Goal Design LLC, an organizational behavior and executive coaching firm, certified as an executive coach with the Huston Institute for Coaching and the International Coach Federation. Cauley works internationally and has worked with leaders at Full Plate Living, HCA, Health Trust, Lowe's, Nashville Metro Schools, Nissan, Ryder, the SCSAC, the state of Tennessee, the hospitality industry, local business, nonprofits, NGOs. And his research includes, I'll let Cauley talk to you about his research, but he's currently writing an idea of becoming within the frame of Warren Bennett's on Becoming a Leader. He enjoys backpacking with his wife, 2 daughters, and dog Max. Welcome, Michael Cauley.
Thank you, Curtis. I'm glad to be with you again.
Man, it's always good to talk to you. Michael and I, for those who may not know, Michael and I on an executive doctoral journey together, and he's just a tremendous partner in this process. We have teamed up on a couple of our projects together. Our research overlaps, and Michael's just a pleasure to be around. So every time I get an opportunity to talk to him, whether on podcast or face-to-face or lately Zoom, he's just always a pleasure to talk to. How you doing today, Michael?
Well, I'm doing good, Curtis. I'm glad to be with you. I'm excited about your podcast, and I am excited about how you want to bring these worlds of theology and business together. And I think I said that the last time I was on, and I continue to be, and because it's really needed, and because I think for many people, something that I found in my research, and you said you'd give me a chance to chat about it, so I'll just mention it briefly, is that I currently study decision-making of healthcare providers in the electronic medical record. So how do they make decisions within themselves, and how do they relay those decisions into the standardization of EMR? And that's where our research interests are similar. And so it's fun to be on this journey together. And, I came to CASE because I wanted to figure out the question that really got me going, and was how is it that when leaders change, or whether they're senior level or mid-level, oftentimes mid-level, right? Because if they were senior, it may be a little easier, but mid-level or when they change, whether it's just reading a book or going on a retreat, and then they continuing education, they come back, they start leading differently. And yet the organization says, you know what, we're glad we were able to provide that to you. We really liked how you were doing things. Just go back to what you were doing before because you were successful. And so I experiencing that myself, I came to case to figure out, is it possible for an organization to change as a result of the people in the organization changing? And that's too big of a topic, that's a whole lifetime. That could be 2 lifetimes of research, right? So right now it's been whittled down to the interpersonal decision making of healthcare providers and how they translate their decisions into the electronic medical record. But it got me thinking, as I was preparing for our time together today, as we were preparing about it and talking about it, about the opportunity for leaders to take a step away in retreat. And retreat can include a couple things. Today I'd like to share a couple examples from my life that are maybe more, really retreat focused. And then what does that provide for the leader, both positive and challenges that it creates as a result?
This is amazing. When we were kicking around topic ideas and you talked about retreat, I call it recharging, whatever term you want to use. It is so critical, so critical. And I didn't realize, I think, until I got to case, how important the role of retreat is. So I know you do a lot of coaching to a lot of high level executives from various industries. So kind of what caused you to arrive at even kind of doing an analysis of retreat?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, for me, it came out of my own experience. My first career, I was a pastor. I think we talked about that
Right.
the first time. And I found a problem. Basically, churches weren't reaching young people where I lived in this small town in the Pacific Northwest. And I wanted to try to figure out how to help. And so I entered a doctoral program and moved my family to Texas, and we started a church out of a hotel room. We had funding, but we did not have people, and so we moved into a hotel. Our house was being built, and fast forward a year on that journey, things started happening. Things started popping. I created an alliance with a merchants association in town, and I started helping them, and they started reciprocating support for the church. And anyway, our church ended up opening up a little coffee shop where we taught people to pray through art, through painting, and through silence. But that came after. So after my first retreat. And so we moved into this hotel. I started, getting to know people, trying to find out who would be interested in joining a church like I envisioned this church to be, which was one that was something that, teenagers and people in their 20s, and this was almost 20 years ago that I was doing this, wanted to be a part of. And I guess 15 years ago, no, even longer. So it's been a minute. And so when you're starting something from scratch, right, where you're fundraising, you are trying to get people, it's this, a church is a business. So
Right.
you have to have revenue, and you have to have customers,
Right.
in order for it to get off the ground. And so that's a lot of work, and it wears you out. And what I found, and I was a lot younger, I was in my late 20s, but what I found is that while I was making progress, I got to a point where I was just tired.
I get it.
And I knew that like some of my clarity and my insight, and was losing some of that because I was just so tired.
Mm.
So in May of 2007, I happened to be attending a class in Michigan, and someone came and talked to us, and it was in my uh, Doctor of Ministry program. Someone came and talked to us about a retreat center and the idea of retreat and what that has done for leaders throughout, the last 2,000 years, longer than that, but 2,000 years in terms of Christian history.
Right.
And she ran a retreat center, and so I thought, well, I'm here over the weekend. I don't have any plans. Let me just see if I can go try this out, because
Okay.
I need some rest.
Okay.
And so I caught her at the break. I said, hello, introduced myself, wondering if you have any availability at your center this weekend. And she said, we just had a cabin open up, and I mean, it was rustic, beautiful, really nice. But let me just kind of stop there in case you have questions. Then I'll kind of describe it.
Yeah, no. This is amazing, because oftentimes we talk about recharging, and we just take a vacation. So no, please continue. Tell me about the retreat center and what made it different from just going on vacation.
Yeah, sure. So what made it different from going on vacation is that I was going to be by myself in a cabin without electricity, no internet access, in the North Woods of Michigan for 30 hours of silence and solitude. Wow. Now, okay, so essentially that's a full, like that's a day and a third, right? So, and like, to me, when I made the decision, like, it sounded really good because I was really tired.
Right.
But then when I went up to her and talked with her, she said, yeah, I have this little tiny cabin. She had these little cabins, and there was a retreat house, but you would walk like a mile away from the retreat house, and she just gave you directions, but you had to go into the woods. And I mean, there were paths, but there weren't signs, and she told you where to go, but you had to find it, and then you would go into it. And in May in Michigan, it's still cold, right? So there was a wood stove. I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but at that point in my life, I'd never lit a wood stove, and I'd always, I'd read in books and stuff, if you don't light it right, you could get carbon monoxide poisoning. I'm laughing because in my little office that I'm in now, I have a wood stove now. So I've learned how to operate one, but back then I didn't know anything. So I didn't even turn it on. I was afraid I'd like carbon monoxide, like poison myself, and so there were quilts on the bed. So water was trucked in on like a little ATV, no plumbing. I think there was an outhouse. So I had a friend. I didn't have a car because I just flown to the location and then gotten a ride from the airport. And so a friend of mine dropped me off, and but what it was kind of, for me, it was a little bit, I don't know if scary was the right word, because I wasn't afraid, but it was just the idea of being by myself. I had to commit that I would be by myself, okay, and I had to commit that I would be quiet, that I would be silent. And that was really hard. That made me not scared, but uncomfortable.
Wow. So I'm assuming no TV either.
Oh, no TV, no electricity, so no TV. Wow. That was before, it was 2007. So the iPhone had just come out, and I think I didn't have an iPhone until a few years later. I think I had a BlackBerry, but back then, there wasn't having a smartphone and having the internet in your pocket. That wasn't really a thing yet. I guess it was on a BlackBerry, but you weren't going to get Netflix on it. You know what I mean? So it really was. It was easy to put that away, a lot easier than it would be today.
Right.
And so I got there, and I met with her. And so she owned the retreat center, and she was also a spiritual director. Okay. Her spiritual director, this was near Notre Dame.
Okay.
And her spiritual director was a nun at Notre Dame, and she'd been trained by her. And that was, all of this was new to me. And I've learned some since then, but all of this was new. So I get there and we sit down, and she says, "Okay, this is your schedule, and I just want to start out by talking to you and telling you or finding out from you why you're here." And and so I started sharing with her, about working to start the church, about my family. My wife and I had our first daughter had just turned. She was 18 months old, so still a young father. My second daughter hadn't been born, and so to be a young father starting a business, which was the church, it's a business,
Right.
and I was tired, and I just started telling her how tired I was, and I thought, she'd be. I mean, she was kind, but she was firm,
Got it.
and I could tell that this wasn't going to be like I came to take action. I wasn't coming just to get rest, if that makes sense.
No, it
Like I
makes
was
total
there for a
sense.
purpose. I was there for a purpose. And so she gave me a book to read, gave me an assignment to read, a journaling exercise. I'm not much of a journaler, so that was kind of, that was another thing that, but it was really there for a purpose. And so then and then after that, then she showed me this little cookie jar that she had that was a little monk, like a little ceramic monk,
Mhm.
and it said, "Thou shalt steal." So, like, you're supposed to steal the cookies. That made me feel pretty good. I could eat as many cookies as I wanted.
Well,
Yeah. And then I headed out, and yeah.
that was okay. So, okay, let me make sure I backtrack, make sure the listeners caught this. So, in your retreat, you basically were in an isolated location for about 30 hours. None of the basic necessities. I can't say it that way. None of the conveniences that we're accustomed to. So, you had your wood burning fireplace. There was no internet, probably no phone.
No
I guess you had your
phone.
phone with you, but you couldn't take your phone up.
Yeah, I think I turned it off, or yeah, I had to make a commitment to not messing with it.
Got
Yeah.
it. So after this experience, and of course, we didn't have some of the technologies that we have today, like you mentioned. So, you didn't have Hulu on your phone or Netflix or YouTube or whatever your favorite way to consume content is. You didn't have those, so it was a little easier. But after the 30 hours was over, what was your takeaway in terms of did you feel refreshed?
I did. I felt rested. It was really interesting. So I had an experience that I've never I don't know that I've ever really talked about it publicly.
Okay.
I mean, I've talked about it kind of in, private settings or in a church setting,
Okay.
but I don't mind sharing. So it was in the night in the North Woods. It still gets cold in Michigan during that time, and I had these quilts, didn't have the wood stove. Um, but then during the night, I woke up and I was doing the exercises and doing a lot of, praying a lot. I was telling God that I was tired. Um, and during the night, I felt this intense warmth
Wow.
in the cabin,
Mhm.
and I woke up, because I'd been cold,
Mhm.
and then I could tell that there was that God's presence was there,
Yeah.
and I just relaxed.
Mhm.
Um, and I didn't try to grab anything or take anything from it. I just allowed myself to be present as well.
Right.
And and then I fell asleep. Next morning, after my time was over, about noon, I think, I got up and walked back to the retreat house and um, went to the guest bathroom there to get cleaned up. And I remember looking in the mirror, and I remember looking like I was refreshed, like my physical appearance had changed
Mhm.
somewhat, and all of that
Wow.
sounds like there's mystery to it.
Mhm.
And I think what's most interesting, and it was a wonderful experience. What was most meaningful to me is that following that experience was so the next 18 months were the most productive that I had been as a leader to that
Wow.
point in my leadership.
Wow.
Everything that I had been working hard for came together because I believe there's providence in it, but I also believe because of the time that I took away, I was able to get clarity of thought so that I
Right.
was able to get out of this planning mode and start really
Mm,
taking action.
got it.
And for me, that's what the importance of retreat was for me. Is retreat was kind of this pivotal point where you're setting plans in place, you're taking actions, but then when you step back, you can consolidate what you've done and you get clarity on the bigger actions to take and maybe even some courage so that you can really start taking the actions that start to lead to payoff for
Wow.
you and your organization.
It's really powerful. Even and I can find a lot of what you did similar to my own life. Now I may have not went to an actual retreat facility, but when I'm in business and I'm faced with difficult situations and I just don't have the answer, there's often I live in the southeast near the coast. I near bodies of water, whether I'm in South Carolina or if I'm in Georgia at the particular time. So I'm normally able to get to a body of water relatively easily, whether it's a lake or something, ocean. Um, wow, that's amazing. Because in times of difficulty, I often try to get to a quiet place. Maybe not 30 hours in a secluded environment, but I try to get quiet, leave my phone, and try to really hear, inner direction. Call it God, call it the Holy Spirit, call it whatever you want. Gut feeling, intuition. People call it a variety of different things. And I go through a very similar process, especially when the situation is bigger than I. When I've exhausted all of the intellect, all of the best practices, the lessons learned, and sometimes that's not enough. I normally seek isolation as well. So it's amazing how how maybe the path to what you do and what I have done, and I'll even say I don't think I was even deliberate. I think I just stumbled across something. But now that I'm hearing you talk about these actual retreat locations that are designed for that, I had an aha moment. Like, wow, that's pretty amazing. So whether we do it organically or inorganically, um, kind of how we put ourselves in positions to hear, get direction. I think that's pretty amazing. Wow, that's amazing. That's an eye opener for me today. That maybe I need to do that more. But you said that after you did it, you probably had the best leadership journey that you've ever had at that point for the next 18 months. That's amazing.
Yeah, the most productive to that point in my leadership that I had been. So it really opened up that step, and it was a very relatively short amount of time, um, and that opened up a lot of forward momentum.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. And I think it brings a lot of value because I think often, especially today, our worlds are so noisy, with the demands. We're in the doctoral program, so you got the demands of doctor education. We're husbands, we're fathers. Then we have our, own personal imposter syndromes and everything else that comes with just doing what we do. And, just getting isolated, retreating is, oh man, that's amazing. That's amazing. I wasn't expecting to get that epiphany today, but I'm appreciative of that. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Wow. I knew we were going to talk about retreat, but I had just a very powerful moment when you were sharing that story and seeing that it may be something I may need in my own personal life, may need to be more deliberate in. Because we spend a lot of time in classes going back and forth talking about electronic health records and decision making and innovation and interpersonal communications. But wow. And
And it
I'll
does.
say, go ahead. What was you gonna say?
Well, I was just going to say it doesn't have to be long. Like I have a Harley Davidson, and I live in Nashville. My house is just 3 miles from the Natchez Trace Parkway, uh, that goes from, Nashville all the way down to Mississippi. And I find, if I just hop on my bike, my motorcycle, and jump on the trace and just, take off. That can be a retreat, or on my bicycle as well.
Wow.
That can be a lot of strenuous physical activity can be a retreat.
Hmm.
And you can design it on your own. Going to a body of water with your phone not with you. That's phenomenal. And if people don't live near a body of water, I'm sure there's, they could go to a mountain, or there may be a place in the city.
Right. We can.
Even a gallery, could be helpful.
I also, and I know this is going to sound cliche, but I feel like I get best direction. Of course, we haven't been flying lately as a result of COVID-19, and I'm not thrilled to sit in a mask for hours upon hours to travel in a closed container. So that's another reason why I haven't personally traveled a lot. But I find a lot of clarity up in the sky. You're on a plane, whether your favorite commercial carrier, and you're 30,000 feet up in the air, and it's you. And I love the window seat, and look out the window and just kind of get direction. And I guess that may be a form of retreat. I guess what you've done for me today is you've reframed retreat for me. It's not always having to quote unquote escape. Because sometimes we take vacation, and I feel like sometimes I'm more tired from the vacation, and you need a vacation from the vacation. Because I like to sit back and kind of relax, and my wife wants to run around and do all these things and shop, and you like do. So you get back and you need the vacation from the vacation. But what we actually may need sometimes is just retreat. Wow.
And it's something that you could just put on your calendar for 4 hours, for what time is good for you, whether it's in the morning or the afternoon or even late at night, for 4 hours that works for you quarterly.
Right. I also, kind of off topic, but I think find retreat in massages. It's a massage parlor I go to. They play this real kind of zen like music, and I fall asleep every time. But when I wake up, I'm so refreshed and kind of like awakened, and very much more self-directed. And typically when I do those, they're typically on Fridays, after a long week. I'll get a massage and I'll kind of wind down. And those are the days where you find yourself kind of just driving in silence, because you don't want to kind of mess up the vibe that you have going on. So wow, yeah, you've kind of opened up the aperture for me today in terms of how to think about retreat, and how those moments that I've gotten retreat, even though I wasn't calling it that at that time, those are the moments that I think I got most clarity. Yeah, that was amazing. I'm glad you shared this, because I think after today's conversation, I'm going to make some personal decisions to do more retreating, to get more clarity. I was doing it even though I wasn't calling it that. Especially when I'm on the verge of big decisions, or life's just really noisy. Wow. You know, um, Again, you talked about exercise. I went and got a nice shiny MBA. And after that experience, I think one of the biggest takeaways I learned was the importance of self-care. We had a whole class, I think it was our leadership course, where the instructor devoted a lot of time. He was former White House fellow, very accomplished gentleman. And he spent a lot of time talking about the importance of diet and exercise due to the stress. But this is an area that I don't think we focused on. I think the diet exercise is the obvious one, but also especially in this mental health crazed environment we're in, where everyone is, very conscious of what's going on mentally. I think this is another gem that we haven't given enough attention to. What do you think?
I agree. And I think, you mentioned all of the noise around us. And I actually teach a class on this at the university where I'm a professor. We talk about visual noise.
Visual noise.
Yeah.
Explain.
Well, in our life, uh, I am much more tied to the visual noise on my phone than I am to the distraction of listening to the radio when I'm in the car, right? Or podcasts, or
Yeah.
you name it. But the visual, like, my life is full of visual noise. In fact, a way of looking at this is, if you have this screen time where it tells you on Sunday, it'll tell me how many hours of screen time I've had. I don't remember how. I think I set it up when I set up my kids, and I thought, you know what, this would be good for me to track too. Well, I mean, a lot of that screen time is work, and a lot of it is also me filling my life with visual noise, um, because of distraction, or busyness. And those things are actually quite similar in that they disconnect us from um, maybe who we were before we started getting success, and before we, um, and then so paying attention, learning to pay attention to not only when we say noise, not only audio noise, but also the visual noise that I allow into my life, that I engage in. And it's not bad, right? We're not talking about good and bad. We're just talking about our life in the early part of the 21st century, that with all of our wonderful technologies, it's created a lot of distraction. And distraction is distracting.
Right.
And it can distract us from taking action in the areas of our life that are going to help us succeed.
Wow. That's amazing. This is a conversation that I haven't heard often enough. And I must take it a step further. We're in a very stringent learning environment, and I find that learning sometimes, and what I'm gonna say is gonna sound like an oxymoron, but learning sometimes can be distracting because it gets your mind running, and I find myself sometime at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking about something I learned and how I can apply it, or what I can do, or what modifications did I make to my paper based on what I learned. And so, yeah, it goes back to sometimes even things that are quote unquote good for us. Like, everyone would agree that learning and knowledge and education is important, regardless of whether you do it in a traditional or unconventional setting, but it can sometimes be a distraction as well.
Yeah, and I find that within the last week, um, in this program, we've had Zoom,
Yes.
once a month for like Wednesday through Saturday, Thursday through Saturday. But with the way that I've arranged this semester, I now am on Zoom 12 hours every week, and two of those are 5-hour sessions, back to back days of the week,
Right.
and I found myself not sleeping well after those long sessions, and they go into the early evening. But I think I'm going to have to, and I was telling my wife this over the weekend, I'm going to have to start scheduling some exercise after I'm on those sessions, just because, like, then my mind, like you, my mind starts going. I think, okay, how am I going to apply this? How am I going to do that?
Right.
And thinking all the time isn't good for me. Like, I need some
Mm.
time where I'm just present with myself and in some type of physical activity.
Right. No, mental breaks are necessary. I mean, even because we're kind of on this journey together. We had class Thursday. We had class Friday. I did a healthcare policy class on Saturday. And yesterday, I did do some reading last night. Yesterday was the Super Bowl, of course. So I made it a point to kind of give myself a mental break. I'm more aware now that I need mental breaks, whether it's learning, whether it's things at work, and I am having to force myself, because I'm one of those people who always is on. So I'm having to now force myself to take mental breaks. But as you know, especially with some of the things we have going on this semester, we have very busy schedules this semester. We kind of knew that, but it's like always something to do. So then when I do take quote unquote force myself to take the mental break, I sometimes feel guilty, like I should be doing X or I should be doing Y, but I need to spend time with my daughter or my son or my wife. And so, dealing with the balance coupled with making sure you get the mental break and kind of that mini retreat that you need. Sometimes just hanging out with friends and family can give you that. So yeah, that's a valid point. And I noticed that my sleep quality has been affected as a result of the new load we have as well too. But yeah, wow. I
But
wonder
then
how. Go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
No,
No, go
no.
ahead.
I was going to say, I just wonder how many other people are being impacted by this, and have they noticed it? That's all I was going to say. What were you going to say?
That's a great question. Um, I was going to say that I think what's important is, we're on this really, hitting it hard right now, but it's only for the next 3 months or so. And so I think a good thing for me, and something that my wife and I did last summer, after our first semester, was we just went to the beach, just the two of us, for five nights, and to the point to where had become so rested that I was tired of resting and ready to get back to it. After 5 nights of just chilling on the beach,
Right.
and I think I think that's how retreat can be used, is also kind of like an incentive. And I've never talked to any spiritual directors. I'm not a spiritual director, so I don't know, but like to set it up, right? So yeah, you're going to push real hard, but then that you have this on the agenda. And yeah, there could be vacation, but there could also be time that is more purposeful for restoration, right? Because vacation, we think about fun, and I'm all about vacation, but then there's also times where planning time that is purposefully reflective, purposefully purposeful planning, I think, can also kind of reinvigorate some of what is spent when we have really challenging and busy times.
Right. No, Keena has made me really, and maybe I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, as you know. So I didn't grow up near the ocean. And I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, primarily for quite some time. And she made me realize and appreciate the importance of the beach. I saw for a long time, and I'm going to say something maybe a little embarrassing. For a long time, I didn't see the importance of going to the beach. Why do people just kind of pull up on the beach with the lawn chair? This is the younger me. Why would you do that? That's just not a good use of your time. But as I get older, I now understand the refreshing that comes from sitting near the water, hearing the waves. This calmness comes on you, feeling the breeze. Kind of, I'm not one of those grounding guys. I'm not one of the grounding guys, but it's something about walking on the beach with your shoes off and kind of feeling the sand underneath your feet. And I didn't think, I would ever say anything like this, especially if you kind of go back and look at the younger me. But now I really have a different appreciation for the beach. And Keena wants to get away on vacation, which I'm still trying to figure out how we're going to make this happen, by the way, for Valentine's Day week. But I get it. She's like, let's go to some water. Let's go near some water where it's warm. And I understand it now. And I think this conversation kind of brought it full circle for me and just shows the transformation I personally went through in my life and this need for retreat and refreshment. So
I think it's a need we all have. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you made me do some self-evaluation today. Go ahead. You said you think it's a need we all have.
Yeah, I do. And, even in talking with you about it today, I could recognize in my life right now that it's been a while.
Yeah.
And that's that's positive. Normally this time every year, we've in our family rhythms, we've gone to Florida for a week. And with some changes in our life, our daughter starting a new school, which has been wonderful for her. But we've lost some of that flexibility. And so we're going to miss that trip. And I've kind of been missing it, not only because it's cold and cloudy in Tennessee and rainy, but also just because when you're tired, that's your body telling you it's time to do something different. It's time to take a little bit of a break.
Right. But I think the media wants us to believe that it's completely acceptable and normal to work 12-hour days as an entrepreneur, 16-hour days, never a day off, hustle hard, grind, whatever words you want to use. Thank God it's Monday. All of these cliches and sayings that fill the airways especially from an entrepreneurial perspective of there's always something to do. And I think, now that I kind of thinking about it from this lens, I think some of that has led to the mental health crisis that we have in this country. And I'm all for hard work, so I'm not saying to minimize it, but no one is equally talking about the importance of refreshment and retreat and mental clarity and mental breaks. So I think that needs to be a part of the conversation as well, because you're seeing us work now more than we've ever worked. We're making probably more as a society than we've ever made, but maybe at the expense of our mental health.
Yeah. Mental health, spiritual health, I think those are connected.
Yes, I believe so. I do. This has been a good conversation for me today, Michael. And I'm really appreciative because in this conversation, you've given me some personal self-reflection and maybe some things I need to change in my own personal life to be the best version of me that I can be. And that's really the reason why I started this podcast, was to hopefully drop clues to learn more myself. I'm like you, we're both very accomplished, but it's always something we can do to sharpen the knife in the tool chest. And this might be one of them, I believe. I believe you gave me a discovery or reintroduction today of some things that I need to go back and reevaluate in my own personal life. So for that, this conversation for me has been, I believe, a game changer. And I think I'm going to implement some personal things in my life as a result of this conversation. So I'm super thankful that we had this conversation.
Well, Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and I always enjoy talking with you.
This was super reflective. And this may be one of those days I can go and mark on my calendar and say, yep, how I viewed life changed that day. Because you have given me some gems to think about and reconsider and contemplate to do a better job of creating quote unquote balance in my life. And I'm appreciative. I'm almost at a loss of words right now. So thank you for that. But this has been a transformational conversation for me personally. But that's one of the reasons why I like I hang out with Michael every chance I get, because Michael is the only guy that I know that will start quoting Bonhoeffer and Churchman and Max Weber and tie it back into some management principle or lesson that we're discussing, or healthcare. And I just appreciate the philosophical bent that you bring to things. It makes me think deeper.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, Mike, I was going to talk to you longer, but I think I just need a pause. So, I'm going to conclude this conversation unless there's something else that you want to drop on us today. This was a short one, but I think very impactful. Any closing words you have, Michael?
I think the only closing word that I would have is it's necessary to step back in order to take deep action. And so if you are struggling to stop, maybe you need to consider whether you're ready to take the next step for growth.
Wow. I have nothing else to say, Michael. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I personally know that you're very busy. And I'm glad that we had this conversation today. I'm going to put Michael's, the information he allows me to share will be in the show notes. I would advise you at a minimum to follow Michael on LinkedIn. And he's doing some cutting edge research, especially within the healthcare sector. So if you are a clinician or a non-clinician or a healthcare administrator, I would advise you to follow his work. He's getting ready to publish a series of material over the coming months. And I believe he's going to be a scholar to watch, especially within the healthcare sector. So I'm going to close out this episode. And until next time, you guys have a great day. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Business Theologist Podcast. Please share, subscribe, and rate this podcast so others can find us too. If you would like to connect with me, please use the links in the show notes of this episode. Please feel free to connect with me on social media as well. I welcome the opportunity to connect and hear from you. Have a blessed week. Until next time.